everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of Monarch Voices, where a podcast where we go beyond the headlines and we talk about issues that are very important to the community. Today we're going to focus on the case of Jason Calhum, a young man from Delaware whose name made headlines back in 2020 for his involvement in a sweeping investigation into alleged gang activity in our area. The case became one of the largest gang prosecution cases in Delaware's history, resulting in conviction of over 20 individuals. Today, we're honored here to have Jason's mother, who will be sharing Jason's story. She'll be telling us about the man that Jason is, the young man that Jason is, the toll that this case has taken on, emotional toll that this case has taken on her family, and also the overall systematic corruption that we have here in Delaware. Since Jason's case has since been vacated, and we're now looking to have a new trial for him. So, Crystal, welcome to the Monarch, to the podcast. So why don't you start by just telling us a little bit about Jason, telling us his story, and telling us about his case.
Who is Jason?
Who is Jason? Who is Jason Calhum?
Well, to me, Jason is my baby. He's a great kid. Well, he's not a kid anymore.
Mm-hmm.
He's a man now. His youth has been, the remainder of his youth has been spent in prison. So he's a father now. His daughter was born a couple of months after he was arrested. So he hasn't, been able to be out here to raise his daughter. Thankfully, we have been able to take her to visit him.
Mm-hmm.
But it took a couple of years for us to be able to do that because he was housed in the equivalent of solitary confinement. By him being in that position, the visits are behind glass.
Yes.
They come in shackled at the hands and the waist and feet. He has to do like this to wave. So that wasn't an appropriate setting for us to take the baby. She did go once when she really probably couldn't understand.
Yeah.
Just so that he could see her.
Mm-hmm.
But when they moved him to a lower level of a security building, it's still not general population, but when they moved him to a lower level area and he was able to have contact visits, that's when we began to take her to visit her dad, and she is a daddy's girl. I can't even understand how she's grown to love him so much, and he's not even out here with her, but he does his best to call her every day.
Yes.
He does video visits, which are crazy expensive, but he does them almost every day so that she can see him, talk to him. He teaches her things by phone. He's been teaching her how many months are in a year, what letter starts with the, they do
the letter of
things,
the day and things like that.
Yeah, so they do things through video and over the phone that he would do if he was home. I remember the first time I took her to visit him on the contact side. So she's used to seeing him on video. So when we went in and he came to the door, she said, It's him. So I guess I don't know whether she was thinking like I see him inside of this thing, but now he's actually walking.
Wow.
And it was just like a real emotional moment because he picked her up and she was touching his hair.
Yeah.
He has locks now, so she was touching his hair.
Oh, he's got locks now.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, his hair's growing.
Yeah,
exactly. So she was touching his hair and everything, and they just were both amazed with each other. Like you could just see the love. So, but recently they were just told that they were doing maintenance on that specific building, and now they're understaffed at the prison, so they had to move them back to the equivalent of solitary, which is the SHU. So now the visits would have to go back to him being shackled and behind glass. So now that visitation is going to have to stop because I don't really want to, we don't really want to take her there. He doesn't want her to see him, like that. So
it's an emotional roller coaster,
it
right?
Is,
it's like progress and then setback, progress and then setback.
It's been like that the entire time.
Yeah.
It's been like that the entire time. it seems weird to say we're kind of getting used to it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, all the ups and downs, because we shouldn't have to get used to, you know, things going backwards. But that kind of has been the story so far. Like, we'll make some progress, and then, you know, it gets snatched out from underneath us.
Mm-hmm.
Make some progress, and then it gets snatched out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we said that Jason's conviction was vacated back in February.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to kind of talk about where we are currently, but I also want to make sure that we are letting everyone know who Jason is, you know, and just tell us a little bit about him as a young man growing up, and just his experience kind of leading up until this point where, you know, his life changed in 2020.
He's very charismatic. He has a magnetic personality, so of course he has a lot of friends.
Mm-hmm.
He's loved by his peers as well as the older community. He's not an angel. Let's get that out now. He's not an angel, but he's not the person that they
Mm-hmm.
tried to depict during the trial. My son is a rap artist. He's an aspiring rap artist. Music has been in our family, so I'm not surprised
Mm-hmm.
that that's the route that he would like to take. My daughter, she was also an aspiring rap artist, and you know, she got to the point where she ended up getting a contract, and she did, you know, she would go and open for other people and, you know, do shows and things like that. So by watching her, that's something that he also chose to do. And her father, you know, was into music, and you know, he would make beats for people and things like that. So she stayed in the studio
all the time
with her dad. So, and with her being in the studio, bringing her brother along, so of course that's the route that he would take. But unfortunately, the type of music that the kids make now and listen to now, they're not listening to ballads, they're not listening to love songs. It's trap music.
Yeah.
And with trap music, it comes a different level of attention. So, you know, he has friends from all walks of life.
Yeah, right.
You know, so I would just get that out of the way there, that, you know, he's not an angel. You know, he has been in trouble before, but he hasn't been in trouble for, like, anything at this level.
Yeah.
At this level. The things that they've accused him of, like, it's just unbelievable to me, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, he's well liked by teachers and staff.
Yes.
I did receive messages and calls, even from when he was in the juvenile detention center. There were people that reached out to me from there, you know, and like, oh my gosh, you know, is he okay? If there's anything we can do, you know, a kid that is a serious problem or a serious threat, I don't think people would care to the level that has been shown to our family, you know, with Jason. Even just people from our community, you know, how they've embraced us through this point, and wanting to keep in touch with Jason, and, you know, letting him know that they care and they love him and that people are there for him. You know, that just speaks to the kind of kid he is.
Absolutely.
It speaks to the kind of kid he is. I mean, I could speak about how he is to me because that's my baby.
Yeah.
But when you hear other people come to you and say, hey, your son, I was at the grocery store, or I was going into the corner store, and he saw me walking down the street, and he purposely came back and stopped and opened the door and held it for me so that I, you know, didn't have to open the door myself, or he carried something to my car for me, or, you know, just the politeness that would come along with him, and the respect for older people and things like that. You know?
And I know that has to feel great as a mother too, right?
It does.
That lets you know that, I know sometimes, like you said, when the kids are around, it's good, they're always on their best behavior.
Absolutely.
But when you hear that those values that you instilled are still coming, are still being displayed even when you're not around, you're still getting that positive feedback about, you're like, okay, he is, you know, he's listening.
He definitely was listening.
He was listening.
Yeah, so he was just about to graduate.
Yes.
He put a lot of work into getting to that point, because he was failing miserably in school, which also contributed to a lot of the problems with school, and, it got to the point where he didn't even want to be there.
Yeah.
Because once a child loses faith, the confidence and faith that the people there really care for you and want to help you.
Yeah.
It's really no turning back from there.
Yeah.
And he had gotten so far gone, that it wasn't helping him.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't helping him. So he actually wanted to go to an alternative school because he felt that there were more people there like him.
Yes.
So once you get in trouble a few times in school, it's like you're labeled from that point on, and it doesn't matter even if you try. You're always looked at as the person that you used to be. So if you're not doing your work, you're not putting the effort in, it really wouldn't matter moving forward.
Yeah. So he felt like he had already been labeled, and this place is a place that I don't fit in, and
and he by his own, doing, he probably could have put more effort into his studies and things like that. I mean, I did everything, but sometimes when different things are difficult for you, I just may not understand how someone feels when they just don't get it.
Right.
So that was part of the problem as well. There may have been some things that weren't identified as far as things that where we could have helped him a little bit better as far as academically, but that didn't happen. So once he got to a point where he just didn't care, it was no coming back.
And that's when he started hanging with the wrong, I don't want to use the term wrong crowd, but he started having friends. I mean, because he's a bright kid, attracts a lot of people. Yeah. But that's good and bad, right? Because everyone's magnetic, attracted to
everybody.
Him. Everybody, yes.
I wouldn't necessarily say bad people, because some of the kids that he met were in the same boat. Like some of the kids that he met, didn't have the same help that he didn't have. So I don't know. It's just like when kids get together and you don't have anything to do, you create things to do, So skipping school, hanging out together, smoking weed, just hanging out, so.
In this generation, there's also a big commitment to fitting in or to be, glamorized, for lack of a better word. So I think that sometimes that may allude to the situations that they get into or the people that are around them, because everybody kind of wants to,
everybody wants to fit in.
So it's hard. I wouldn't want to be a young person in this time frame. It's just so superficial and so I don't know. And I have a daughter very close to the age of Jason. So as a mother, this hits me very
close to home.
Yeah, just very close to home, because they had probably the same upbringing or around the similar upbringing, and it's one decision or one engagement that can
change everything.
Right. It could be anybody's child.
Yeah.
It could be anybody.
Yeah. It could be anybody.
It could be anybody. It could be any of us.
Yes.
It could be any of us. It's bothered me so much that I've been able to see how our judicial system works, where you don't necessarily have to be guilty. It doesn't matter. Things boil down to conviction rates.
Yes.
They don't care about the intricate things. All they care about is a conviction rate. So if you were to get arrested, you're looked at immediately as guilty.
Yes.
Not innocent until proven guilty. You're looked at as guilty.
Yeah.
Because you are it's a, I wouldn't say a game, but it's a numbers game to them. When you get arrested, you have just become a number.
Yeah.
And that number is going to serve their promotions, their bonuses, you know, all of those kind of things. Conviction rates mean something to a prosecutor, to the Department of Justice.
Yeah, I'm getting a little antsy, as you can tell, because we're starting to get into some of the meat and potatoes of this case. And as I mentioned, this was one of the largest gang prosecution cases in the state of Delaware. There were over 20 individuals convicted. And when I read about this case, the first thing that came to my mind was how convenient that this entire complex case was wrapped up together so nicely with a beautiful bow on it. And I'm also, from, I guess, just a statistical perspective, me being, you know, sometimes a high conviction rate is not always good, because that means you never get it wrong. And if you never get it wrong, you know, and this takes me back to my days. I used to work in my early days of customer service, and they would want us to have these call times that were, you know, magnificent. And I thought I was killing it.
Yep.
And when they pulled me into the office, I thought I was going to be praised because my call time was so low. They said, no, it's actually too low.
Right.
So I almost don't believe you should have a 100% conviction rate.
Absolutely.
Because that means that you've not left any possibility that you could have made a mistake.
Right. I also feel like it's not that they didn't leave any possibility for a mistake. They set out knowing that there will be no mistakes.
Yes.
There's no room for mistakes, that this will end exactly how we set out for it to end. You know, it's almost as if it's like a dramatization. Like it's like they have rehearsal for the trial as it unfolds. Like, I literally could not believe some of the things that I saw take place, and it was allowed to happen. It was done under the watchful eye of the court, you know. Now I'm thankful that the judge that granted him his motion did that. However, it was the same judge that sat there and watched all of the manipulation, the corruption, and things taking place, and nobody put the brakes on. Nobody put the brakes on. And I understand that he opted for a jury trial.
Yes.
But the judge is there for a reason. The judge is an overseer of the entire process. You know, so when something happens that's unintegral, or something that's basically unlawful for you to do, I believe that the judge should put the brakes on and do something about it at that time, so it doesn't spiral out of control. Because once you get to the end, you have all of these things that you have to dig through to get back to the issues that were, and by then it's like, well, what do you do?
How do you put the toothpaste back in the tube?
Exactly. How do you do that?
Yeah.
You know, as you guys saw the documentary, you know, so there were a lot of things that came up during the trial that at this point they probably really don't matter, since his motion was granted for a new trial. But I actually went to a meeting with the lieutenant governor. She had a meet and greet, and when I explained that his case had been, his motion for new trial had been granted, so to me that means that it's vacated. That old trial is out of the way, it's gone. You know, so now the prosecution has a decision to make how they would want to move forward, if they're going to challenge the judge's decision or whatever. So I did lead with my son's motion has been granted. So everybody in the room was under the assumption that, okay, well, you got what you wanted. Like, okay, well, so are you doing this? Are you speaking about this to help other people? And it's bigger than that. I do want to help other people, but yes, we did get what we wanted. However, now we're at the point where we're still at risk for the same exact thing that we went through before to happen again, because none of the issues were resolved. They just like, okay, we'll give you what you want. Your trial, you got a motion for a new trial. We granted it. everything that happened, let's not even talk about it anymore. Let's make pretend it never happened and we'll start fresh. Well, we do need to talk about what happened because there's the potential that it could happen again. And I'm already seeing signs that things are going in the wrong direction, you know? So one of the things that stuck out to me most during the original trial was one of the star witness that was used in this whole case, you know, the guy that we saw in the documentary.
Yes.
He said on the witness stand that my son's lawyer represented him at a previous time, which is absolutely unacceptable, you know, and the lawyer said, no, I don't believe it was me. He said, I think you're mistaken. And he was like, no. He was very kind. He was like, no, it was me. It was you. And he gave him the information and the dates that he represented him. Now, I would think at this point, a judge would say, wait a minute.
Yeah.
But the lawyer turns to the judge and he says, Your Honor, I don't think it was him I represented it. I believe it was his father. You know, and the guy said, no, it was me. He's going back and forth with the lawyer. So he said, I don't believe it was him. It was his father. So the judge at this point, she did turn to my son and she said, Mr. Calhum, if it was his father, are you okay with moving forward? And my son said, yes, Your Honor. If it was the father, yes. If it was him, no.
Should have been stopped right then and there.
It should have been stopped then and there. It should have been stopped to do a conflict check.
Yes.
It should have been stopped so that we could go or so that they could
somebody
go.
Pull the records.
Pull the records.
Yes.
And find out. But court just continued as if this was a verbal agreement that okay, we'll just move forward. But my son specifically said, if it was him, no. So we still to this day, several years later, we still don't know if he represented him or not. We still don't know. Nobody bothered to do a check. So that speaks to it's going to end how they set out for it to end. You know, they set out to say this trial is going to be won by the state. And no matter what, that's exactly what happened. You know, because for something like that, you would think that the conflict check, that would be the next.
Yes.
We should recess.
Yes.
Do the conflict checks and then come back and assure the defendant that, okay, this is who he represented or he did not represent him on such and such a date or whatever, you know. But I can't understand for the life of me why the guy would say that he represented him if he didn't. Because you're there to help them prosecute.
Yeah, so what's in it for him to, what reason would he have?
What reason would you have? So that's all the more reason for somebody who is neutral, which is the judge, to say, well, we're going to check into it anyway. I can see the prosecution not wanting to do it. You know, I can also see our lawyer not wanting to do it because you've already taken our savings. You've taken our money. You've taken everything that we've had to scrounge up to pay you. And now at this point, we're mid-trial. Why would you admit that you represented this guy? You know, why would you do that at this point? It's too much has happened so far. Now we're halfway through the trial at this point. You know, so but the officers of the court, the higher up of the court, you know, and I'm very, very thankful and grateful. I don't want to seem ungrateful that she granted the motion, but at the same time, I feel like she granted the motion because there really wasn't any choice because we presented so much evidence that if you don't grant the motion, then it looks crazy. You know,
and how long did it take for this motion to be granted?
Well, we had the hearing on May 13th, I believe it was, of 2024. And she did not make a decision on this case until February 5th of 2025. And she made it on her way out the door because she didn't get reappointed, from what I understand. And she made that decision as one of her last cases going out the door. And we were told several times along the way, oh, well, we should be hearing from the judge in 30 days. We should hear from the judge in 120 days. Oh, we should hear from the judge. But then it started getting close to election time, you know. And, you know, when a new governor comes in, they have the option to choose the people that they want in certain positions. So this is just my opinion. I don't know if this was the mindset at the time, but I'm thinking, why would you sit on a ruling that you know has so much evidence that you can't rule in his favor? Why would you sit so long to give the answer that we knew it was going to come to anyway? If you looked at it, you know, with a clean eye, you know. But I can imagine in my mind that, well, I may want to get reappointed. And I don't want this out there right now. With all of the controversy surrounding the case and everything, and I don't want that, because I may have an opportunity to get reappointed. So I'm just going to sit on this and wait until the very last minute. Now, we thought that she was going to make a ruling in December, because we were hoping that the new governor, once he was elected, that he would appoint his you know, do the judge appointment back in December, but he didn't. So he held off on that, and then after January sometime, he made his confirmations, and she didn't get reappointed. So that's when she made her decision going out the door. I mean, it just all lines up for me when you look at it on a timeline. It doesn't take you that long to decide if you want to marry somebody if you have all the evidence that they're for you.
Exactly.
You know. So when you have, she had pictures, she had hospital records, she had the juror's own comments that he's made. She had screenshots. She had his history of his Facebook account. She had relationship information that we had found through obituaries, doing research through obituaries. I mean, we dug deep and found all of this information. So it was almost like, how can you not rule in his favor? You know, it was a situation where you have a juror on this jury that was shot in a home invasion. That's one of the main questions on the jury verdict selection, where it asks you, have you, a close friend or family member, ever been a victim of a violent crime not limited to gun violence? And he didn't say yes. He didn't speak up. He can read, he can write, he's very he's educated. From what I understand, I've seen his social media profile. He does credit repair. He's a real estate person. So your education level is not at the point where you wouldn't understand a simple jury verdict asking you questions.
So what was the intention there?
That's my concern. And when I brought it to the lawyer, he kept telling me, "Oh, nobody's ever going to believe this. This isn't plausible. Nobody ever, the judge will never hear it." And I said, well, wait a minute. If we found out that there was somebody on the jury that knew my son, we found out somebody on the jury had been shot in a home invasion, you know, he's been arrested, why wouldn't it be plausible? Why wouldn't the judge hear it? How can you decide a case that involves gun violence and you were a victim of gun violence? I definitely would be biased. You know, if me or any of my close family members were affected.
And possibly still traumatized.
And yes, and possibly, absolutely. And I'm glad you said that he was traumatized, because in one of his Facebook posts, we went back and did the entire history of his Facebook. And after he was shot, he posted from the hospital. He said, I can't wait to get out of here. Some, whatever term he uses, he called the guys tried to take my life, but it didn't work. They're jealous and all of this stuff. And all. So then when he gets out, even a year later, he says, you have to forgive me how I move sometimes, because I'm still messed up behind what happened to me.
Trauma.
That's trauma.
That's trauma.
And he continued to say things like that annually. Like you could go back through the history of his account and you could see where he's talking about how this happened to him. So you would skip that question. And speaking to the corruption of it all, I believe, I'm not accusing, but I believe that he was placed on that jury. I believe he was placed there because what young person do you know wants to participate in the court system, you know, and wants to be on a jury, that's dying to get on a jury, that they would ignore all the safeguards that are put in place to make sure that you have a jury that's free from bias. You ignore all the safeguards just so that you can get on there. I don't know any young person that would want to do that. I don't
know any person that
I
would
don't know
want to
any
do it, because
person. Unbelievable.
Trying to not be on a jury is like
that's the goal.
That's the goal, right?
Yeah. I mean, for some people, some people do want to be on a jury, but with him, I mean, I would see I'm looking everything up on this kid and on his YouTube, you know, got weed symbols and stuff all on the wall. Like, you don't want to go to court. Like, you know what I'm saying? You're sitting there doing your YouTube channel and you're smoking with your friends, and and that's fine. That's fine. But that doesn't strike me as a person that would be dying to get on a jury. That would want to get on a
very
jury.
public profile, it seems.
With a very public profile. Even during the evidentiary hearing, we found through his own, now we knew that he had communicated with someone that could possibly be called by the prosecution in the
juror.
case. Yeah, we knew that because we saw a screenshot online. We saw a conversation online. It was a live where someone had did a check-in and said, "Where's my ninjas at?" And he was the first person to check in on that person's live. He was the first person, and he was like, "Right here, bro," and he gave him, he gave him the wave. No, he at this point, I think he gave him the wave emoji. Mm-hmm. But then he talked to him again by social media, and it was during the trial. And on social media, he gives him the sergeant salute. To me, the sergeant salute means I'm in agreement. Mm-hmm. I don't know
what. Why was he not dismissed from this jury?
At the time, nobody knew about it. Nobody knew about it at the time, and I don't know what that hand gesture meant. It could mean anything, but from a judge's angle, anything that shows image of wrongdoing, you have to take it in the benefit of the defendant. You should do that, because we don't know what any of that meant. So. But when he got on the stand and they began to question him, we only knew about some of the Facebook posts and some of the Instagram posts. But he I guess maybe he didn't know what we had and what we didn't have. So they asked him, when did you speak with this person, that could possibly have been called in on the case? And he said, well, one time I spoke with him on recess. On recess? On recess?
He called him up?
I don't know who called who, but they talked
on recess of the trial.
Of the trial, on recess. So, he didn't specify which recess, but, we broke for recess for lunch. We broke for recess when people needed breaks. Mm-hmm. We broke for recess at the end of the day until you resumed the next day. So at what point did you go to lunch and call? Did you call?
That's my question. And what for?
And what
for?
What
did they ask what they communicated about?
No, I don't think so. Mm-hmm. I don't think he remembered if they did. But I do have the transcript from that hearing. But and it wasn't like he didn't know, because the person's name was read out loud during the voir dire instructions. Mm-hmm. So even if you take the standpoint that academically you're not knowledgeable enough to read a piece of paper and comprehend that I'm looking at this name and it's somebody that I know and I should say something. If you can't do it visually, audibly he heard it, because they also read it. They read it out loud. He still didn't make the connection. Yeah. It even went as far as when we were in trial, the person that they were talking about was in a picture with my son. And they were, just taking pictures, and that picture was passed around in court. So you saw your friend. And you still chose not to say anything. So that's making me think, what's driving you to stay on this jury? Something is driving you to stay there, because you had every opportunity to leave. Somebody left the jury because their wife or somebody got into an accident. Somebody left because somebody had COVID. You know what I'm saying? So if somebody was dismissed in the beginning of the voir dire because their daughter or their sister was pregnant, and they said that they didn't want to miss the birth, just in case while we were in trial, if they got called, they would have to leave because they didn't want to miss the birth. They were dismissed. So you don't need a huge excuse to get out of jury duty. Right. If you know somebody that may be mentioned, just excuse yourself. So what is it? Why did you want to stay there? Why did you want to stay?
And also, I have to point out, we all know Delaware is very small.
Yes.
The odds of these young people not knowing each other, right? They knew each other. The odds of these young people not touching each other on social media or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and they went through my son's entire social media profile. They took like pictures of him and his friends, which could be innocent pictures. You know, they could be innocent pictures, and they brought them in, you know, and they're showing the pictures on the big screen, like stuff that had nothing to do with what, you know what I'm saying? Like it could have been anything. And so when this guy looks at these pictures, if you know, and from what I understand, he told someone that he knew a lot of the people that were in the pictures.
So he could be leaking information right on the recess.
Yes.
Like this is
like if you knew a lot of the people that were in these pictures,
because that was my other point.
Why are you here?
So if there were 20 individuals, I'm going to keep saying this, one of the largest gang prosecutions in Delaware history, resulting in the convictions of over 20 individuals. So think about the 6 degrees of separation within Delaware.
Right.
All these young people know each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, so at that point, he has several outs where he could just say, I shouldn't decide on this case. But I believe that he couldn't leave.
Yeah. And
he actually told somebody that he couldn't leave. He said he didn't have a choice. He had to stay. Now, what that meant, I don't know. But you know, he stayed. At any rate, he stayed. So just think about it like this. When we found out the information, we were told that they were not going to present it to the judge. We were told that, you know what, this doesn't make sense. Nobody will ever hear it. But it got to the point where it was so many things that just didn't seem right. We told the attorney, well, if you don't file the paper, then we're going to do it ourselves. Right. And you're going to look crazy because if your defendant is filing a pro se document or his family is filing a motion on his behalf and he has representation, why aren't you filing it? Right. So we went ahead and we filed the motion. We took it to the down to the Department of Justice, got it clocked in, took it to the parliamentary's office, got it clocked in, and now it's on the record. So at this point, they forwarded all of that information to his lawyer, and then his lawyer had to go back and file the motion. It wasn't because he just thought like, I believe in this case. He filed the motion because he was put in a position where you really don't have a choice. The information is out there now. And that's part of the problem that I have now. We have information of corruption in the case, but we don't know how do you give or report information to the people and when the people that you report it to are corrupt. You know, so where's your help? Who's your help?
Who's your advocate?
Who's your advocate in all of this? You know, you can report it all day long. The court knows what's going on. The court knows what's happening. The court knew. We kept asking, you know, when is there going to be a decision made? You know that we had this hearing on May 13th. You know that you had a plethora of evidence to support our claims. You had more than enough. Why did it take you from May 13th until February 5th in the next year to give an answer on something that we all knew had to be the correct answer? We knew it. Just off of just one question. Have you, a close friend or a family member, ever been a victim of gun violence?
That's enough right there.
If you were shot in a home invasion, you have the medical records, the hospital records, everything. You have the police report of where the police came to the man's residence. What up? What else do you need? But not only did we have that, we had so much. We had screenshots of his social, everything. So all of these things coupled together definitely put my son in a position where he didn't have a fair trial.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't just that he didn't have a fair trial. See, now when we're going back, he didn't have a fair trial because of a conflict of interest. He didn't have a fair trial because of the juror misconduct issue.
I got it.
He didn't have a fair trial because, they accused him of things that were not accurate. He didn't have a fair trial because they manipulated text messages. There were so many things that were done during the trial that should have never happened.
Mm-hmm.
They sprung documents on my son that he had never even seen before during the trial and told him, hurry up and sign.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to help you. So it doesn't make sense. And my son has not given a statement. He hasn't, because he knows anything that you say can and will be used against you, and they can manipulate anything you say. So he chose to just let his lawyer represent him, and he trusted that his lawyer would represent him to the best of his ability.
Now he doesn't still have the same attorney, does he?
No. But
okay.
this is another thing. So when we filed the motion for the juror misconduct issue, we also filed a motion to fire his attorney and for Jason to go pro se, because we figured if your help is not your help, you might as well take your chances on yourself. So they kind of discouraged him of that, telling him how hard it was going to be for you to go pro se alone, and which it is. It's very difficult, but it really wouldn't make a difference because it was difficult working with somebody that's working against you. When we filed the motion to get rid of the lawyer, we go into the hearing, and my son again gets on the record all of the things that his attorney was doing that was out of order, leading with the conflict of interest issue, leading with refusing to present things that could point to my son's innocence. Blatantly refusing to do it. They let him withdraw from the case instead of us
firing him.
Ultimately, I guess it comes down to the same thing, but on the record, it shows that his lawyer withdrew.
Yeah, and it does it. To me, actually, that's a big difference, because if I'm doing due diligence on an attorney to see that he was removed from a case
versus withdrawal,
that's a huge difference.
That's a big difference.
Because that makes it seem like when he withdraws, he can't work with you.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I have a difficult client.
Yeah, this case is, I can't.
The relationship is irreparable.
Correct.
But yeah, it is irreparable, but it's not irreparable on our part.
Correct.
Because we did it. So this lawyer allowed us to make payments to him.
Mm-hmm.
To me, he was fairly pricey. And even after he didn't do everything that he should have done, even after he didn't act in my son's best interest, we had, I think, one more payment to make after the trial was over. And normally everything should be paid up front before the trial ends. But he did allow us to make payments. We still gave him his final payment. We didn't walk away. We did what we were supposed to do. Even though the trial was lost, even though he didn't do what he was supposed to do, this was the agreement that we made, and we're going to honor our commitment. And we still paid him anyway, even though he did everything the exact opposite of what we thought he should have done. And then he gets to withdraw.
This is huge. This is corruption and cover up from so many different levels.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And this whole time the clock is ticking.
On
Jason's life, his daughter's life. Life is going on, right?
His daughter will be 5 years old in September.
Wow.
She'll be 5.
Yeah.
She was born when he was in jail.
Wow.
So he's missed a lot of the beginning things in her life, other than the things that he can participate via video, but he's missed a lot, and as I try to explain when we went to the meet and greet for the lieutenant governor, as far as who do you report these issues to, when you have no help, one of the solutions that was offered is, there is the Office of Disciplinary Counsel, which I definitely know about the Office of Disciplinary Counsel. I wanted to file a claim with them for the judge, for the lawyer, and issues with the prosecution. I wanted to do that. But when you file a complaint with the Office of Disciplinary Counsel, it has to be coupled with supporting documentation. So when you go online and you fill out that form, you need to upload something that's supporting your claims. You just can't go there and say, well, I believe that this happened, or I know this happened, and you don't have a document to support what you're saying, because it doesn't make sense. You have to have documentation. So one of the things that I brought up is it took 2 years for us to get a copy of the transcripts from the trial. It took 2 years. So it doesn't take that long to print out the transcript. It doesn't take that long. But it does take that long when you need to go back in and omit this, and you need to switch this around, and you need to make some changes. It does take that long when you have to go back in and go over your mistakes. And as I tried to explain at the meet and greet, that the transcript is the holy grail of documents. This is where you use your appeal from. This is where you're going to use any of your complaints from. If he had to appeal this case and he said, well, this happened during trial or that happened during trial, but the transcript says something totally different than what actually happened and what your claim is, then you have no appeal issues. You have no appeal issues. So that's what I was trying to explain. So I could go to the Office of Disciplinary Counsel, but when the document that I need to support me in those claims has been altered, actually not even altered, have been completely dismantled and recreated.
And it took 2 years. So even that, right? So even that is a delay of timeliness, right? Because if I know that this transcript is the holy grail and I prevent you from having it, so that stops any appeal or anything. That puts everything on hold until this transcript can be reproduced.
And keep in mind that when you bring a claim against an attorney or something like that, there's a 2-year statute of limitation.
Oh my goodness. Please.
So it's a 2-year statute of limitation. So it's almost
is so
you gotta laugh to keep from crying, because like, how can people not see what is happening here, and not, somebody doesn't say, I need to look into this, or there needs to be another set of eyes on this. We had several people in court, and at the end, when they pronounced the guilty verdict, the co-defendant's attorney asked to poll the jury. And when you poll the jury, it's just a last plea for accuracy. It's nothing wrong with polling the jury. That would be a good move for a defense attorney to do, just to make sure everybody's on the same page, that the verdict was accurate. I can see the prosecution objecting to polling the jury.
Who objected?
Our lawyer.
What?
Our lawyer stood up, slapped the table, and said, Your Honor, I object. That's not necessary. Let's move on.
What?
Why? Why wouldn't you want a last plea for accuracy? But you know what? That's missing from the transcript. That's missing. It's not there. It's totally dismantled and recreated. It's gone. That's just one of the things. That's just one of the things that's missing. And that's the actual thing that I went to look for first. And that's how I knew immediately something was wrong with these transcripts, because that was the thing that was just like a punch to my gut when he asked the judge not to poll the jury. And the judge did the right thing, because honestly, in open court with all these faces on you, that's absolutely ridiculous. So she overruled his objection and let the jury still be polled. But like, even then, no red flags are going off. So why is the defense objecting to this? And I went to, so there were several people that were arrested for the same crime. So I went to one of the other co-defendants' trials just to go in and just sit and listen, because I want to make sure, I want to hear what's being said at this trial, versus what's being said at my son's trial, just trying to piece it all together and say, okay, well, at this trial this was said, then at this trial this was, and it was a lot of differences. It was a lot of differences. But
from the state, from the prosecution.
Yes. So something that really stuck out to me was one day when I went into court, they didn't expect me to come there. They probably wouldn't expect me to come there. When I went in, one of my son's attorneys was sitting with the prosecution.
Girl.
And she didn't see me. So my son had 2 lawyers. It was a man and his assistant, who was now an attorney in his office or whatever. And she did most of the work on his case. So she was friends with the prosecutor every day. Like, they would come in and say, oh, when you talked to me last night and told me what you were going to wear, that's why I wore this. I mean, all bubbly. And I'm sure they all talk. I'm glad that they actually did it out in the open, because they probably do it behind your backs anyway. So that's something that's going to happen. But when I came in and saw them sitting, I said, this is odd. Why would my son, and I could see if it was a different case,
Yeah, it's the same case.
It's the same case. So that's a conflict in itself. Why would you be sitting with them on this case? It doesn't make sense, So she saw me and she left. She got up and she walked out.
Yeah.
But I made sure that I made contact with her. I actually ran into her in the hallway. I was like, oh, hey, how you doing? And I kept it real general, and I asked her, about my son's clothes, could I pick them up from the office and everything, right? So then something said to me, you got to cover yourself, because these people are wicked. You have to cover yourself. So I sent her an email and said, hey, I saw you in court today.
Right.
And I just wanted to let you know that I wanted to follow up about the clothes. So I made sure that I put in writing that I saw you in court, that I saw you there. So, aside from us asking for copies of his warrant, never received it. Aside from asking, and they sent us blank pages of documents. We would request and say, hey, we need this document, we need that document. And they'd be like, oh, I'll send it right over. But then they send us blank documents and then say, oh, I'm sorry, maybe it didn't print. I'll resend it and resend the same exact thing. And I have emails saying, hey, we still never received what you were supposed to send us. This is information that we need. He should be entitled to his warrant information. Everything about him is under seal. The information that my son had in reference to this case was enough to fit in a small envelope. That was enough to fit into a small envelope, what he was privileged to seeing. So you come into court with boxes and boxes of information, but the only thing you give this young man to defend himself is enough to fit in an envelope. It just doesn't make sense. It was like a lot of the things he was hearing for the first time when he sat in court. He was like a sitting duck.
Yeah, and so you spoke a little bit about the cost of Jason's attorney. I'm also assuming this is a very high-profile attorney that has worked a lot of cases, that is well-known and well-experienced.
Yes, with his tenure, he shouldn't have made some of the mistakes that he did.
Just making
Absolutely
sure.
not. One of the big things that he did in the beginning of the case, he was time barred. That's something that is not, that alone. So when you raise an issue and the judge tells you, okay, well, you have a certain amount of time to respond, with a response, he didn't do it. He just missed the deadline. And then when he was explaining, he didn't even know what part of the information he was supposed to be pulling from. He was just totally confused. And he's been in the business for years. From what I understand, he's not what he used to be, but he's handled some very high profile cases. So for you to be time barred, that's something that's so, a deadline, for you to miss a deadline on a trial so complex, so important, you just missed the deadline.
And he has an assistant.
That's what I was going to say.
And you have an assistant.
And she's
picking out outfits with the prosecution
and over at the other court.
Yeah.
Right. And you miss a deadline that is important to the case. That actually is important to the case. That will allow a deadline that will allow the prosecution to bring stuff in that they shouldn't have been able to bring in. You missed the deadline. You missed it. So it's things like that. So yeah,
So, Crystal, I'm sorry, did you have a follow-up question?
No, I was just going to say that there's so much that has to be, that needs to be communicated that we probably we can't get it all out right now.
So that was my thing, is I want to know what, I agree. And I think it's going to be more than one discussion, but let's talk about what our next steps are, what we need to do, the immediate action steps for me, you, Dawn, everyone out there. What are our next steps? And what are, I think, the issues that are at risk? Because we know we're at risk for this all to happen again. So now do we need timely action? Do we need to make sure do we need to bring awareness to this jury? All of this that has happened before. How do we know this is not going to happen again? Where is your mindset as far as how are we looking at the future and our next steps?
Well, it's also funny that you bring that up at the end, because where we are now is we've reached out to the Office of Conflict Counsel and asked, had my son been assigned an attorney yet? Because at this point we didn't have the finances to get another high-profile lawyer again after that. It took us by surprise anyway to have to come out of pocket with that kind of money in the beginning, and then now to have to do it all over again. We just didn't have it. So he's going to use a public defender. He also used the public defender for the evidentiary hearing to get the case, to get it vacated. But the attorney that they just assigned to him, and we asked in the beginning of the week, did he have an attorney? And he said, they said no.
Beginning of
last month.
Last month, okay.
So we asked, has he been assigned an attorney? No, we're still working on it. But then a couple of days later, in the same week, they tell us, oh yeah, he's been assigned an attorney. This is his name. So immediately I look him up, and it says his office is permanently closed. So if you're permanently closed on a Google listing, that means you're closed for business. It doesn't mean your office hours are closed. It says permanently in red, But then I just checked last week, and miraculously he's open again at the same location, and he has like one review or something like that. So it's almost like they're building a profile, in my opinion, for an attorney. Because if you've gone through every attorney in Delaware to see if you can represent my son as conflict counsel, and then you go out of state, you pick somebody that may have a conflict that needs to be explored. And then also, the office was permanently closed. Now, miraculously, it's open. That's telling me right now that we're heading in the same direction. So what we need is somebody who is in a position of influence, somebody that's in a position of authority that can just look into what's going on. I'm not asking anyone to agree with us. I'm not asking anybody to side with us. I'm asking whoever is in authority to do what's right, to look into all of the issues that have happened, because collectively they contribute to the bigger problem.
Yes.
So, and if it keeps continuing at this pace, then we're going to be in the same place we were before. So if there's someone in a position of authority, that's what we need, for this to be reviewed in its entirety, not just to look at, just this or that. We have so many things, as you saw in the documentary, and it probably sounds during this session that, okay, well, her son was convicted and now she wants some help for her son, because he's been convicted and now he just got off on a technicality. No, that's not it. There were so many other issues that contribute to he was constructively convicted.
Yes.
And quite possibly was used as, a small fish that's caught in a bigger net. Where the prosecution used someone in a cooperation agreement that was facing life, plus 195 years and used him to testify against my son.
Yes.
And testify in a lot of other trials across the state of Delaware. So if this house of cards collapses,
You mean this pretty little
this
gift
pretty
in a
little
bow
gift that
with
they,
a bow and it's all packaged
this
up?
beautifully packaged 100% conviction rate. If this gets out there that you use this guy to prosecute my son because you're going to be able to use him to maybe make 60 other convictions, you know, or however many other convictions you're using him for, then why won't we let this fish go when we can contribute to our conviction rate with so many more?
Yes.
And we'll take this little guy here, you know. So it's bigger than that. And from what I understand, one of the prosecutors that's on my son's case also read the cooperation agreement in the court on the, is it Matt Denny? The case where that was just recently overturned for something similar with cooperation agreements, with a secret recording, and it's information that's out in the news right now where a conviction had to be overturned because of these shady dealings behind closed doors. You know, so if that gets out there, of course they're going to fight us tooth and nail for us not to even be able to defend ourselves. I was told by my son's previous attorney that handled the evidentiary hearing, she told me that the judge made a ruling against me, his mother. And I'm asking her, why did the judge make a ruling against me? Because I show up. Because I show up, I bring people with me because I don't trust these people, you know. So she said that the judge made a ruling against me that I wasn't allowed to have any updates on my son's case. And I asked her, I said, well, I'll tell you what, if she made a ruling against me, I want to see it in writing. And if you don't give it to me, I'm going to go down to the court and get it myself. So then she tells me, well, maybe she didn't make a ruling against you. Maybe she just suggested. Well, which one is it? A ruling or a suggestion? And why are you allowing a judge to tell you a suggestion not to give me any information when I'm my son's only help on the outside? Because he doesn't have a computer in there. He doesn't have the ability to do the things that we can do out here, file motions and research things and all of that stuff and show up and get people collectively to come out and hear what's going on. So of course you will want to deter me from coming. When we were in the evidentiary hearing, we brought our pens and papers and we were taking notes. The bailiff came over to us and said, the judge said that we are not allowed to take notes in court, that it's illegal, which we found out later that is not true, and said that if we continued to take notes, we would have to leave. Even if they saw our pen come out again, we would have to leave. So for his lawyer to even know that and not challenge it and bring it up, like, our notes have been his biggest help. Our notes are why we know that this transcript has been altered, because we had so many people, a packed side of the courtroom, taking notes. You know, and everybody's notes are in agreement, you know, so that's been our help. So you're going to try and take that away, you know. So it's things like that we need people to look into. Okay. And my son's notes were taken as well. He was taking notes during the hearing. They took his notes and never gave them back to him. Never gave them back to him. And before the hearing, they didn't tell us that he had court. We had been waiting for this hearing for a long time. Didn't tell us. They came and got him, took him to the court. I ended up finding out that there was court that day, and I got a couple people together and we went up to the court. So I told him before he got there, take notes, put everything down, and write down as much as you can, you know, so you don't have to leave anything up to memory. Well, when they saw him take notes, they took his too, and didn't give them back to him.
I mean, I don't know.
And the night before, they searched his cell. I'm going to call it raided his cell, because they took him and locked him in the shower, shook his room down. They said that we saw you on camera steal a razor or bring a razor back to your room. And he was like, I don't have a razor. He was like looking all of my stuff. He said, why would I do that? He knows like something like that would get him in trouble. So they locked him in the shower. Everybody on the tier saw they blocked off the area to his room, but everybody saw ransacked his room, tore his room up, right? Looking through the stuff. And when he goes in, he goes back to look for his papers for court.
And they're gone.
They're gone. The specific papers for his hearing, like the notes that we needed and all of that stuff for him to follow along, all of the claims that we had brought up, they're gone. But this is part of a bigger problem because something similar happened to somebody else at the same prison, and it was directed from the prosecutor's office for them to do that.
Wow.
You know, so this is not like, I'm not imagining things in my head saying, hey, my son is innocent. Like, there are things that are happening that are constructively prosecuting people for numbers versus prosecuting or trying cases according to the law.
Justice and law and the law.
Yeah, with justice in mind. The scales of justice.
The scales of justice are imbalanced.
Yeah, so that's where we need
that
help.
may
We
be
need help
the,
balancing it.
that may be, I think that's the title.
it,
The
that's
scales of justice are imbalanced.
Yeah.
Well, Crystal, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And I hope
Thank
that
you.
you'll come back. Maybe we'll give this like a month or so for everyone out there to get caught up on Jason's case. I'd also like to provide everyone with the link to the documentary, if that's available too, so that we can get some exposure for that. If you find that necessary.
Yeah, we actually have to reload it. We had taken it down while we were waiting for the hearings and everything to go through, but I think we'll go ahead and put it back up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
my question is, how much is too much attention? Is there anything such?
I don't think so at this point.
Okay.
At this point, I don't think there's too much attention. Like, we need people to be talking about what's going on at that courthouse.
Okay.
At that courthouse, because today it's my son, tomorrow it may be somebody else's, or it may be you.
And that's the truth.
When you get caught in that net and
Yep.
people start manipulating paperwork and changing things, then you're at their mercy.
Yeah.
So it's important for
Do
everybody.
better. They need to do better.
do better.
Do better.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
This has been a pleasure.
It's been a
Thank
very
you so
good
much.
pleasure. Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
very much, Crystal.
And I kept it together.
Yes, you did. All right. Thank you guys for joining us today. Peace, love.